So shout out to Timothée Chalamet, who introduced me to Bob Dylan's Outlaw Blues on SNL. You know, when they said that Chalamet was going to host and perform, I was like, okay, what is he going to do? But he ended up doing Dylan songs from the movie A Complete Unknown. And, ever since I've seen Chalamet in Dune 2, I've gotten more appreciation of him. I really do. Like, he's a pretty well-rounded guy. He kind of really fits SNL really good. And it was a sketch early in the beginning. He was when he was hosting initially, and he was saying, "I want to do my Oscar speech." So he went to the seat, and then he said, "And the Oscar goes to," and they say Kenan Thompson, and Kenan got the Oscar, and Chalamet was sitting there looking like this. And I was like, you know what? Down the road, I think Chalamet might play a crazy guy or a guy who's perturbed. You know, something like Michael Douglas in Falling Down, or I know they're already doing, I think, American Psycho with Austin Butler, but something like that where Chalamet is not the nice guy. He's actually playing someone that's kind of creepy. I think that's down the road because he can actually do it. So when we got to the performance part of it, he started performing these songs, right? And I heard the beginnings of Outlaw Blues, and it was a very jangly song. I was like, man, this is really good. And I started thinking the way Chalamet was performing it, I was like, man, this sounds like something the Doors would have done. It sounded exactly something that Jim Morrison would and the Doors would have done down the road later in the 60s. But then when I listened to the Bob Dylan version, which because I think the Bob Dylan version came out in 65, I think, I started thinking, oh, no. It's more of the Stones. It's something that Mick Jagger and Keith and Charlie Watt and Bill Wyman and Brian Jones would have done back in the day. And I was fascinated by this. I'm fascinated by this just because it shows you that Dylan, even though he started off as acoustic, he had an ear. He had an ear what was popping at the time. And even though he wasn't trying to sing like Mick Jagger or anything like that, it was still Bob Dylan's voice. But it was a jangly rock tune with a harmonica. He just added his harmonica and all that stuff, which the Stones did because Mick Jagger played harmonica. So you felt the Rolling Stones' influence on that track. But I feel like I haven't really given Bob Dylan enough credit. Like, I knew his influence, right? So I totally get it. I totally get it. Like, even now, you still see people like Springsteen does it with the whole thing, the guitar and the microphone, and it kind of goes back to Woody Guthrie and all that stuff. So I totally understand it. And I totally respect him as a songwriter and all that stuff. But I really don't know a lot of Bob Dylan songs. If you ask me about the Beatles, I can tell you about the Beatles. If you ask me about the Stones, I can tell you about the Stones. If you ask me about the Doors, I can tell you about the Doors. I can't tell you a lot about Bob Dylan. And they don't play too many Bob Dylan songs on the radio because, I mean, we're talking about in the 60s, right? So unless you listen to like an oldies station where they're playing like classic 60s music, you're not going to hear Bob Dylan stuff. So I want to thank Timothée Chalamet because one of the things he said was he's going to perform. He said in the beginning of the show, it's like, I'm going to perform some songs that you might not know by Bob Dylan. And he's absolutely right. So shout out to Timothée Chalamet. Shout out to Bob Dylan. Shout out to the Rolling Stones. Shout out to the Doors. And shout out to all the great music that came through the 1960s. And if you're a Bob Dylan fan, give us some other songs that we should know by Dylan that really is completely unknown to us.